Rescue in the Alps. Paul! The rescue center is on the phone. The shout broke the calm inside the ski lodge. Here we go again, Paul said, shaking his head. His coffee cup almost slipped from his hand. He looked at his half-finished drink and sighed. Can't I just finish my coffee? He put the cup down and walked to the phone. Hello, this is Paul, he said. Paul, there's a skier stuck in the Alps. Maybe a leg injury. They can't move. Can you go now? The voice on the phone sounded worried. Of course, Paul said. He grabbed his bright orange rescue jacket and smiled. Looks like my day just got more exciting. As he zipped up his jacket, a group of kids playing outside saw him. Mr. Paul! Another rescue? One of them asked, excited. Paul stopped and smiled at them. That's right. But don't go skiing on the mountain while I'm gone, he said, pretending to be serious. The kids laughed and waved as Paul went outside. The cold wind hit his face as he started his snowmobile. The snowy peaks looked calm and shiny under the sun. Paul looked at them carefully and said, I hope this rescue is easy. But today feels different. Paul rode his snowmobile along the winding mountain path. The engine hummed steadily under him. He held the handlebars tightly. His eyes scanned the endless white landscape ahead. It had been a long time. He still hadn't found any signs of anyone. The sun started to set. Long shadows stretched across the snow. Every moment of searching felt longer and heavier. Doubt began to grow in his mind. Then, Paul saw something. It was a faint trail of footprints. The footprints led toward the ridge. He followed the trail carefully. His heart was beating faster. Finally, he climbed to the top of the ridge. He saw a figure waving for help. He moved closer. It was an old man with white hair. The man was wearing a warm hat. Next to him was a large backpack. The backpack was almost as tall as he was. Hello? I'm Paul from the rescue team. Are you okay? Can you move? Paul asked. The old man sighed. My leg isn't broken. It's just stiff from the cold. But I can't leave now. I have very important work to do. Paul raised an eyebrow. Work? Here in the snow? Maybe it's safer if we head down first, sir. The man shook his head firmly. I'm a scientist, and I came to test my new machine for studying avalanches. But it malfunctioned, causing a small avalanche that nearly buried me. He motioned toward the backpack. Curious, Paul asked. What kind of machine is that? The old man hesitated, then unzipped his backpack. Inside was a device full of blinking lights and wires, looking like something from a science fiction movie. Paul whistled. Wow! Are you sure this is for researching avalanches? It looks more like it could create them. The scientist gave a shaky laugh. Actually, it can cause avalanches if it goes wrong. That's why I need help shutting it down safely. If we don't, it might trigger a bigger snow slide. Paul glanced up at the steep slope above them. All right, he said, rubbing his chin. We'll figure this out. But first, let's see if you can stand and warm up a little. My snowmobile is nearby. We can't risk just riding down with this big machine if it's that sensitive. The old man nodded. Thank you. Oh, by the way, I'm Dr. Bernard. Paul offered a smile. Nice to meet you, Document. Let's see if we can stop your avalanche machine from going wild. Paul checked the machine's small screen. A big red timer showed just under 3 hours left. He felt a rush of worry. So if this countdown hits 0, we might get a real avalanche, right? Dr. Bernard nodded, wiping his sweaty brow despite the cold weather. Yes. I tried to shut it down, but it locked itself in test mode. If we jar it or drop it, it could go off early. We need to disable it carefully. Paul took a deep breath. We can't just carry this thing back to town. It's too risky. Let's find a safer, flatter spot to work on it. We need space and, hopefully, less chance of triggering loose snow. Bernard frowned. Agreed. But how do we move it? Slowly and gently, Paul said with a half smile. We'll walk. I'll lead. You hold the machine. Let's wrap it in something soft to protect it from bumps. They used a thick blanket to cover the device, then started hiking across a gentle slope. Paul kept an eye on the terrain, watching for cracks or shifting snow. He also checked the timer every few minutes. 3 hours left, he murmured. What a fun afternoon. Bernard's voice shook a little as they walked. This isn't my first time on a snowy mountain, he said. When I was young, I lost a friend in an avalanche. That's why I started studying them. I wanted to stop them and save lives. Paul looked at him, surprised. That's a big goal, he said. But your machine could help. It could save people. Bernard gave a small smile. If it doesn't cause more problems first. Bernard tried to lighten the mood. Well, at least the sun is still shining. Could be worse. A blizzard might roll in. Paul forced a laugh. Yes, let's not invite any blizzards, please. Just as he said that, the wind picked up slightly. Paul glanced at the sky. Dark clouds seemed to be forming far away. Doc, he said quietly, I think we should hurry. This weather might change soon. Bernard nodded. Right. The sooner we stop this countdown, the better. I really don't want to see a snow explosion happen in my face. Paul nodded in agreement. And I still want to make it home for dinner. They walked carefully for about 20 minutes. The snow was deeper in some spots, and Paul had to warn Dr. Bernard to step lightly. Suddenly, the ground shifted beneath their feet. Paul felt a small crack open in the snow. Move back now! Paul shouted. His voice was loud and shaky. He pulled Bernard's arm hard. Snow rushed past them, loud and fast. The ground shook under their feet. Paul's heart beat fast. They were so close to danger. Bernard stood still. His face was white, and his eyes were big with fear. "That was so close," he whispered. Paul nodded and took a deep breath. "We need to keep going. One step at a time," he said. Soon after they changed direction, the device started beeping loudly. Beep! 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 The sharp noise echoed through the valley. Out of nowhere, a few curious mountain goats appeared. One goat trotted right up to the blanket-wrapped machine and sniffed it. Another goat tried to nibble a corner of the blanket. "Whoa, easy there, goats," Paul teased, gently waving them away. "This is not your lunch." Bernard managed a shaky laugh. "They must be attracted by the sound. Or maybe they just like blankets." Paul grinned. "I've had goats chase me before, but never a ticking machine." The goats seemed determined to join them. Paul had to steer them away from the steep drop. "Come on, buddies, off you go," he said, gently pushing one goat in the right direction. Finally, the goats lost interest and wandered off, leaving Paul and Bernard to continue. But the wind picked up more, and thick snowflakes began to fall. Within minutes, visibility dropped as a small blizzard hit. Bernard stumbled, nearly dropping the machine. Paul lunged to support him and keep the device safe. "That's enough drama for one day," Paul shouted over the howling wind. "We need shelter." He spotted a small cave near some rocks. They hurried inside, gasping for breath. The goats had already vanished into the snowy haze. Inside the cave, it was dark and cold, but at least the wind noise was muffled. Bernard turned on a tiny flashlight and placed the machine on a flat rock. "I can try to fix the wiring here," he said between chattering teeth, "but we must be very steady." Paul nodded. "Take your time, document. We still have a couple of hours left, right?" He checked the timer. "Yes, a bit less than 2 hours. Let's hope this cave keeps us safe from the storm." A gust of wind howled outside, making an eerie whistle. Paul forced a joke. "At least the goats aren't here to chew on the device." After about an hour, the storm began to slow down. Paul looked out of the cave, squinting at the snow. "The wind is slowing down, but it's still bad out there. Let's keep moving before it gets worse," he said. Bernard hesitated, holding the device carefully. "Are you sure? We can't see much." "We don't have a choice, document. We have to go," Paul said, motioning for him to follow. They stepped out slowly, each foot sinking into the deep snow. The air felt heavy, and the sky was dark gray. After a while, they found a flat spot near some rocks. Paul pointed. "There. It's clear enough to fix the machine, and the rocks might block the wind." Let's stop here. Bernard put the machine on a flat rock and took out a small toolkit from his coat. I'll fix some wires and restart it, he said. Then we can turn it off. Suddenly, the machine made a loud beep. The timer started moving faster. What's going on? Paul asked nervously. Bernard's hands froze above the panel. It's a safety mode. If I don't fix it, it might start early. Paul looked at the timer. 15 minutes left. Then 10. The seconds felt like they were moving too fast. Doc, we're running out of time. The timer kept going. 20. 15. 10. Finally, Bernard pressed some buttons on the keypad and hit a green button. The machine beeped 3 times and stopped at 0:02. For a moment, they just stared. Then, the machine made a soft noise and went quiet. Did we stop it? Paul whispered. Bernard nodded, letting out a long breath. Yes. It's safe now. They laughed, feeling a wave of relief. Just then, the rescue team arrived on snowmobiles. One of them waved and called out, Paul! Were you working on a science project out here? Paul laughed. No way! I've had enough of science for a lifetime. Bernard smiled at Paul. Thank you. Without you, I might still be in that cave, or worse. Paul shook his head. It's all in a day's work document. I'm just glad we both made it out of this countdown adventure. Back in the small town, people were amazed by Paul's story. His students asked a million questions. Mr. Paul, did you really almost cause a big avalanche? He laughed and replied, No, that was Dr. Bernard's machine, not me. But it sure was an exciting day. Dr. Bernard stayed for a few more days to repair his device and add extra safety features. He also invited Paul to join his research team. You know these mountains so well, Bernard told him. And you stay calm in danger. You'd be a perfect field expert. Paul smiled. I'm flattered, Doc. But my students need me here. I enjoy teaching them to ski and helping them love the outdoors, without making it explode. The scientist nodded, understanding. Before leaving, he handed Paul a smaller version of the device. Don't worry. This one only measures snow depth and temperature, no countdown timer. Paul laughed. I appreciate it. My heart can't handle another ticking clock right now. The next morning, Paul was back to his usual routine, leading children down the beginner slope, giving them tips on balance, and cheering when they succeeded. Some students still giggled and said, We heard you were in a scary cave, Mr. Paul. He shrugged. Yes, but it all worked out fine. Then he put on a mock serious face. Just remember, if you ever see a blinking machine on the slopes, call me first. Paul's adventure soon became the talk of the town, and people began calling him the Avalanche Tamer. He felt shy about this nickname but sometimes joked. Now my orange jacket makes sense. I'm easy to spot when an avalanche tries to get me. Life returned to normal. Each morning, Paul woke up early, stretched, put on his bright orange jacket, and reminded himself how lucky he was to live in such a beautiful place. Sometimes he glanced at the small device Bernard had given him, thinking about that crazy countdown day. And whenever he saw the goats wandering near the school fence, he couldn't help but smile, remembering how they tried to eat the blanket. Yes, Paul thought, even a quiet town can hold the biggest surprises. So if you ever visit the Alps, keep an eye out for a man in a bright orange jacket. He just might be Paul, ready to rescue a lost skier or chat about his countdown adventure with a friendly laugh.